The world of mythology is vast, filled with gods, heroes, creatures, and stories that have transcended time and geography. Yet, when we think of myths, especially the Greco-Roman ones, we often picture grand battles, complex pantheons, and tales filled with both wondrous beauty and tragic endings. But myths, when told in a calm, measured voice, can become something more, something gentle, something that can accompany you as you drift into a peaceful sleep. In this video, we are going to explore some of the classic myths from ancient Greece and Rome, not with the usual fast-paced, dramatic retelling, but in a way that invites you to rest, to reflect, and to let go. These stories, although often filled with chaos, beauty, and profound lessons, can also be told slowly, almost meditatively, allowing their timeless qualities to sink in. As we embark on this journey together, think of these myths not just as stories of old, but as whispers from the past, carrying lessons that still resonate today. They've been passed down through generations, each telling slightly different versions of these age-old tales, but all of them filled with symbolism, mystery, and meaning. They reflect the human experience, with all its struggles, triumphs, and tragedies, but told in a way that is soothing and thought-provoking. In many ways, the Greco-Roman myths are like the foundation of storytelling itself. They are the blueprints upon which many of the myths and stories we tell today are built. And yet, in this context, we're not here to analyze every detail or search for hidden meanings. We're here to experience the stories for what they are, calming, reflective narratives that invite us to slow down, to breathe deeply, and to let our minds wander. So, let's take a deep breath and settle in. As we explore these myths, there is no rush. We're not trying to fit everything in or create a sense of urgency. Instead, we're going to let the stories unfold in their own time, as they've done for centuries. This is not about heroism or war, not about the noise and drama that often surrounds these tales. Instead, it's about the gentle rhythm of their telling, the quiet spaces between each event, and the calm resolution that comes with the passage of time. We begin our journey in primordial chaos, where the very first gods emerge from a nothingness, and from there, we will move slowly through the unfolding of the world and the divine, touching upon both well-known tales and those that are less often explored. Through each myth, we'll encounter divine beings, each with their own personalities, struggles, and relationships with humans, yet all presented with a calming touch that allows us to feel the slow progression of these ancient stories. The goal here is not overwhelm, but to offer a space of peace, much like the eternal quiet of the ancient gods themselves. There are no sharp turns or sudden changes in pace. Instead, everything flows as naturally as a river moving through the landscape, slowly, gently, with purpose and without force. This approach allows the listener to not only absorb the mythological elements, but also to become part of the experience itself. By the end of each story, we'll have drifted deeper into the world of the gods, the heroes, and creatures of ancient lore. And when the time comes for each myth to end, we'll let it go with the same tranquility with which it began. Now, before we begin diving into the individual myths, it's important to understand that these stories are not merely fantastical creations. While some may dismiss them as mere fables or fairy tales, they have deeper layers of meaning, shaped by the cultures that created them. The ancient Greeks and Romans saw their gods not just as powerful beings above them, but as figures who reflected the complexity of the human condition. They were both divine and deeply flawed, and their stories served as mirrors for the people who believed in them. Take Zeus, for example, the king of the gods. His actions, his rise to power, his decisions in times of war, his relationship with other gods and humans, offer us glimpses into the complexities of leadership, power, and morality. And yet, when we look at these stories through the lens of relaxation and calmness, we see something more than just battles or politics. We see a divine being learning, adapting, and sometimes failing, but doing so in a slow, almost meditative way. There is no rush, no hurry, only a steady progression toward wisdom. The same can be said for heroes like Heracles and Odysseus. Yes, they are known for their strength, their bravery, and their heroic deeds. But what if we focus on their journey? What if, instead of viewing their actions through the lens of glory and conquest, we see them as part of a long, winding road, one that leads not just to victory, but to reflection and understanding? In this way, we transform what might seem like an epic adventure into something peaceful and serene, a journey that mirrors our own, where each step is as important as the destination. In the same way, we'll explore stories like that of Persephone, the goddess of the underworld, whose myth is not just about life and death, but about the quiet rhythms of nature and the passage of time. We'll think about Narcissus, not just as a figure consumed by his own reflection, but as a symbol of self-awareness and the importance of balance in life. Through this lens, these myths are not just stories of gods and mortals, but reflections of the natural world and the way we, too, are shaped by the forces around us. As we go through these tales, remember that there's no rush, no need to hurry to the next story. Allow each myth to unfold at its own pace. Allow the slow rhythm of their narration to guide you into a state of deep relaxation. These are not just stories to listen to. They are stories to immerse yourself in, to let them wash over you and bring you peace. The calm unfolding of these myths invites us into the world of ancient Greece and Rome in a way that is peaceful and reflective. This is not about battle cries or swift victories, but about the steady passage of time, the calm unfolding of events, and the quiet wisdom that comes with age and experience. In the end, the myths themselves are not just about gods and heroes. They are about us and the way we relate to the world around us. So, take another deep breath, let go of any tension, and allow the stories to begin. There is no need to chase the endings or rush to the next myth. Let each moment exist as it is, full and complete. This is your journey through the ancient myths, told gently, calmly, and with the intent to bring you rest, peace, and relaxation. At the beginning of everything, before there was order, before the gods walked the earth, there was nothing, a vast, formless void known as chaos, a state of complete disarray and emptiness. But out of this emptiness, the seeds of the world began to stir. The very first gods, born from the void, were not like the gods we often think of today, great and powerful beings. No, these were primal forces, personifications of aspect of nature and existence itself. They were the first elements that would eventually give rise to the world as we know it. The universe, as understood by the ancient Greeks, began with chaos. But from this chaos, the first beings Gaia, the earth, Uranus, the sky, and Erebus, the darkness, came into existence. It's important to understand that their existence wasn't like the way we might think of the birth of humans or even gods. They were not born in a narrative of growth or physical transformation. Instead, they were always there as the fundamental components of the cosmos, waiting for everything else to fall into place. Gaia, the earth, was the embodiment of the land itself, the very ground on which all life would eventually be built. She was a nurturing, fertile force that would support everything that came afterward. She arose from a void of chaos, and with her, the foundations of the world were laid. Just as the earth beneath our feet holds us, so too did Gaia hold all that would live. She was both the beginning and the end, the cradle of life and the end of all things. Alongside Gaia, Uranus, the sky, appeared. Uranus, the vast sky above, covered the earth like a protective blanket, a barrier between the land and the unknown forces that lay beyond. He was not just the heavens in a physical sense, but a personification of the vast, unknowable nature of the universe. He was limitless, an expanse so great that it could hold the entire world within it, yet distant, separate from the world beneath him. The balance between Gaia and Uranus was delicate, like the first breath of life taken in a quiet, still world. Together, they represented the duality of the natural world. The earth, solid and grounded, and sky, expansive and eternal. They existed together, giving shape to everything that would follow. From these two primordial beings, the first children were born. The Titans, a race of powerful beings who were neither entirely good nor evil, but forces of nature that could both create and destroy. These Titans were the ancestors of the gods who would later come to dominate the Greek and Roman pantheon. Some were benevolent, while others were malevolent, and the relationships between them were as complex as the forces of nature they represented. But before the gods rose to prominence, it was the Titans who ruled. Gaia and Uranus had many children, but the most significant of these was Cronus, one of the youngest Titans. Cronus was destined to overthrow his father, Uranus, in a violent act of rebellion, and it was this act that would set into motion the events that would shape the cosmos for all eternity. However, the relationship between father and son was not one of mere opposition. It was a tension between the known and the unknown, between the present and the future, and between the past and the ever-approaching change. Cronus, upon rising against Uranus, sought to claim the heavens for himself, cutting his father down and casting him aside. Yet, even in this act of violence, there was an underlying calm, a sense of inevitability, as if the universe itself had whispered that this was the way things must be. Cronus became the new ruler of the heavens, and with him came a new order, one that would eventually lead to the rise of the Olympian gods. But as much as Cronus tried to establish control over the cosmos, he too was bound by the same forces that had shaped the world before him. The prophecy that foretold his fall at the hands of his own child haunted him, and so, in his fear, he swallowed each of his children as they were born, hoping to prevent the prophecy from coming true. Yet, even in this act of desperation, there was a sense of inevitability. The forces of fate, represented by the very chaos for which the world had emerged, were always at work, shaping the future in ways that no one, not even the gods, could fully comprehend. The creation of the world was not a single event, nor was it a violent clash of forces. It was a slow, unfolding process, one that spanned eons and saw the rise and fall of countless beings. It was a process that, at its core, was about balance. Chaos gave way to order, the earth to the sky, the Titans to the Olympians. It was a steady rhythm, like the changing of the seasons, like the ebb and flow of the tides, each moment building on the last. As the world continued to evolve, the gods of Olympus would merge, led by Zeus, who would eventually overthrow Cronus and bring a new era of divine rule. But even as the Olympians rose to power, they were not immune to the forces that had shaped the cosmos in its earliest days. They, too, would face challenges, battles, and upheavals, but the process of creation, destruction, and rebirth would continue, ever steady, ever inevitable. The creation of the world in Greco-Roman mythology is not a story of instant creation, but a tale of slow evolution, one that reflects the calm, steady passage of time. There are no abrupt moments of violent change, but rather a series of gentle shifts, like the turning of a wheel, the movement of the stars. It is a story of the world coming into being not in a flash of brilliance, but in a gradual, natural way, in line with the rhythms of the universe. As we consider this story, we might reflect on the way that our own world came into being not in a single moment, but in a slow, methodical progression over millennia. Just as the world in the myth emerged from chaos and found its balance in the hands of Gaia and Uranus, so too did our world emerge from the quiet forces of nature, evolving slowly over time. And just as the gods were born from the primal elements, so too do we, in our own way, emerge from the quiet forces of the universe. The creation of the world is, in many ways, the ultimate expression of this idea, that nothing is truly created in an instant, that all things take time, that even the most powerful forces of the universe must move at their own pace. This story, like the myths that follow, is not just a tale of gods and monsters, but a reminder of the slow, inexorable passage of time, and the way that the universe unfolds quietly and inevitably one moment at a time. The universe, which had been created in such a quiet and steady fashion, was not to remain calm forever. As with all things in life, change is inevitable, and the first great conflict in Greek mythology arose from the very forces that had given the cosmos form. The Titans, the children of Gaia and Uranus, had once ruled the world, embodying the raw forces of nature, power, and time itself. They were creatures of vast strength and ancient wisdom, representing an era that was about to be overthrown. Their reign, though not without its own order, would be challenged by the rise of a new generation of gods, the Olympians, who would bring about a new era, one of balance, civilization, and divine rule. This period of conflict is known as the Titanomachy, the War of the Titans, a mythic battle that would define the future of the gods and the fate of the world. It is a tale of rebellion, of sons rising against fathers, of the clash between old and new, chaos and order. But as with all stories of mythology, even this great war unfolds in a way that is less about violence and more about the slow, inevitable forces of destiny that shape the universe. At the heart of the Titanomachy is a figure of Zeus, the youngest son of Cronus, the Titan king who had swallowed his own children in an attempt to prevent a prophecy that foretold his downfall. The prophecy spoke of a son born to Cronus who would eventually overthrow him and take his place as ruler of the heavens. In a desperate attempt to avoid this fate, Cronus devoured each of his children as soon as they were born. But when Zeus was born, his mother Rhea tricked Cronus by giving him a stone wrapped in swaddling cloth instead of the newborn child. Zeus was hidden away and raised in secret, far from the reach of his father. As he grew, so did his power, and when the time came, Zeus was ready to fulfill his destiny. He returned to confront Cronus and, with the help of his brothers and sisters, forced him to regurgitate the other gods he had swallowed. This was not just a battle for power. It was symbolic reclaiming of what had been lost, the restoration of balance to the universe. The gods that had been swallowed were not just Zeus's siblings. They were forces of nature that had been stifled by Cronus's fear and ambition. When they were freed, they joined Zeus in his rebellion, and together they would wage war against the Titans, their own parents and predecessors. But the war itself was not a sudden, violent explosion of conflict. Like many aspects of the mythological world, it was a slow and inevitable process. The battle between the Titans and Olympians unfolded over 10 long years, with both sides fighting fiercely, but each moment was laced with a sense of destiny. The Titans, led by Cronus, were formidable in their power, but the Olympians, led by Zeus, had the advantage of youth, cunning, and the divine powers they had inherited from their mother, Rhea. Throughout the war, the gods were not alone. They were aided by other mythical beings, including the Cyclopes and the 100-handed ones, creatures born from Gaia, who had been imprisoned by Uranus. These beings, with their extraordinary strength and abilities, tipped the scales in favor of the Olympians. The Cyclopes, in particular, forged powerful weapons for the gods, most notably the thunderbolt for Zeus, which had become his signature weapon and a symbol of his rule over the heavens. The battle itself was long and grueling, and it was not simply a contest of might, but also one of strategy and cunning. Zeus, with his wisdom and tactical mind, knew that the Olympians could not win through sheer strength alone. It was a creative and clever use of their powers, coupled with the help of allies from within the depths of the earth, that gave them the edge. The Titans, on the other hand, were powerful but rigid, bound to their old ways and unwilling to adapt. Their inability to change was their downfall, and it became clear that the Olympians, with their fresh perspective and innovative approach, would ultimately emerge victorious. After 10 years of fierce conflict, the final battle came. Zeus, with his thunderbolt, struck down Cronus, casting him into the depths of the earth. The other Titans, those who had fought beside Cronus, were either imprisoned or cast into the abyss. The war was over, and the Olympians had emerged victorious, but the victory was not without its costs. The Titans, though defeated, were not destroyed. They were simply removed from the world of the gods, relegated to the darkness of Tartarus, the deepest part of the underworld. The Titanomachy, however, was not just a physical battle. It was a struggle for the soul of the world itself. The Olympians, in overthrowing the Titans, did more than just change the rulers of the heavens. They brought with them a new order, a new understanding of the cosmos. Where the Titans had been primal and chaotic, the Olympians brought a sense of structure, justice, and balance. The Olympians embodied the qualities of intellect, beauty, and harmony, attributes that would define the classical age of Greece and Rome. Zeus, as the king of the gods, established a reign that would last for millennia, but his victory also marked the beginning of a new chapter in the world's story. The Olympians were not simply rulers. They were also teachers, mentors, and figures of morality. Their reign was one of order, of bringing law and justice to the world. They created the pantheon that would influence generations of humans, and their actions set the stage for the stories that would come in the future. But the Titanomachy also serves as a reminder of the inevitability of change. Just as the Titans had once overthrown their own predecessors, so too would the Olympians face their own challenges. The cycle of rise and fall, of creation and destruction, is a theme that runs throughout all of mythology. The gods themselves, powerful as they were not immune to the passage of time and the forces of fate. As the Olympians ruled, they would face their own conflicts, struggles, and eventual decline. But for now, their victory in the Titanomachy marked the establishment of a new era, one of divine authority, order, and harmony. As we reflect on this great battle, we see that it is not simply a story of gods and monsters. It is a tale of transformation, of the inevitable shift from one era to the next. It reminds us that, like the gods themselves, we too are subject to the forces of change. And just as the Olympians emerged victorious over the Titans, so too can we overcome the obstacles in our lives, as long as we remain adaptable, strategic, and aware of the slow, steady passage of time. The rise of Zeus is a tale that begins not with grandeur or immediate power, but with quiet rebellion and a sense of destiny that unfolds slowly over time. Zeus's story is not simply one of triumph, but one of patience, cunning, and the gradual accumulation of power. His journey from the son of Cronus, swallowed at birth, to the king of the gods, is not one marked by immediate force, but by a steady resolve and a realization of his own inevitable path. It is a story that reflects the nature of the world itself, at first chaotic, then slowly coming into alignment with the forces of order. As a young god, Zeus was hidden away by his mother, Rhea, in an attempt to save him from the wrath of his father, Cronus. Cronus, in his fear of a prophecy that foretold he would be overthrown by one of his own children, swallowed each of his newborn offspring as soon as they were born. The gods he consumed were not just the children of the earth, but the future itself, swallowed into darkness before they could fulfill their purpose. But when Zeus was born, Rhea knew she had to act. Instead of offering Cronus her newborn son, she gave him a stone wrapped in swaddling cloth, and Cronus, in his blind fear, swallowed the stone, believing it was the baby. Zeus was hidden away in a secret cave on the island of Crete, raised by nymphs and nurtured by the divine creatures who would one day become his allies. His upbringing was not one of royal splendor, but one of secrecy, training, and quiet growth. It is often in the most humble and hidden of places that the seeds of greatness are sown. As Zeus grew, so did his powers, and with that growth came an understanding of his destiny. But it was not enough for Zeus to simply accept his fate. Even in his youth, he understood that the power of the gods was not freely given. It was earned through struggle, strategy, and the quiet unfolding of plans over time. The moment would come when he would confront Cronus, his father, but that moment would not be rushed. It would be a slow, careful dance of manipulation, wisdom, and divine intervention. The gods of Olympus, Zeus's siblings who had been swallowed by Cronus, had to be freed, and for that, Zeus would need allies, wisdom, and patience. The first step in Zeus's path to power came when he sought the aid of Metis, the goddess of wisdom. Metis was an intelligent and cunning figure, known for her ability to outwit even the gods themselves. It was through her guidance that Zeus was able to free his siblings from Cronus's stomach, forcing the Titan to regurgitate the gods one by one. With each return, the Olympian family grew stronger, and the forces of the Titans began to falter. However, freeing his siblings was not enough. Zeus knew that to challenge Cronus and the Titans for control of the cosmos, he needed more than just the strength of his brothers and sisters. He needed powerful weapons, strategies, and divine allies to tip the scales in his favor. It was at this point in his journey that Zeus met the Cyclopes, the great one-eyed giants who had once been imprisoned by Cronus. The Cyclopes, grateful for Zeus's help in releasing them from their chains, forged for him the thunderbolt, a weapon of unparalleled power. With the thunderbolt in hand, Zeus now had the means to challenge Cronus directly. The weapon itself symbolized Zeus's connection to the power of the heavens, a force that would be used not only to battle, but to establish his dominion over the skies and all that they encompassed. But even with the thunderbolt, Zeus did not rush into battle. He understood that timing was everything. The battle for control of the heavens was not just about power, but about patience, strategy, and a deep understanding of the flow of destiny. Zeus's rise to power was a gradual process, built on a foundation of alliances and careful maneuvering. It was not the rapid, explosive force that many associate with heroes, but methodical, calculated progression. It was as though the universe itself had been preparing him for this moment, and every action he took brought him one step closer to fulfilling his destiny. When the time was right, Zeus and his allies, his siblings, the Cyclopes, and other divine creatures, waged war against the Titans in what would come to be known as the Titanomachy. This war, though long and violent, was a final step in Zeus's ascension to the throne of the gods. The Titans, once mighty and untouchable, were defeated, and Zeus emerged victorious. Cronus, his father, was cast down into the abyss of Tartarus, and the Olympians assumed their place as rulers of the heavens. But Zeus's rise was not just about the defeat of the Titans. It was about the establishment of order and balance in the cosmos. With the Olympians in charge, the world moved from a chaotic and primal state into a realm of harmony and law. Zeus, as the king of the gods, brought a sense of justice and order to the universe, reigning over the heavens, the earth, and the sea. His rule was not one of arbitrary power, but of wisdom and fairness. He governed the world with a steady hand, ensuring that the laws of nature were upheld and that justice was served. Zeus's reign also marked the beginning of a new era of divine interaction with humanity. As the king of the gods, he was no longer a distant figure, removed from the world of mortals. Instead, he took an active role in the lives of humans, often intervening in their affairs, offering guidance and, at times, punishment. Zeus's relationship with humanity was complex, filled with both moments of kindness and acts of divine wrath. He was not a god who could be easily understood or predicted. His power was vast, his decisions often shrouded in mystery. Despite his power, Zeus remained bound by the same forces that shaped the universe. He was not an omnipotent being, invulnerable and all-knowing. He was a god, yes, but he was also a figure shaped by fate and destiny. Like all the gods, Zeus had his flaws, his impulsiveness, his jealousy, and his occasional cruelty. But it was these very flaws that made him relatable to humans, who too faced the complexities of emotion and decision-making. Zeus's rise to power was not just about becoming the most powerful god, but about understanding the responsibility that came with that power. As he sat on his throne on Mount Olympus, overlooking the world below, he was not simply a ruler. He was a symbol of the balance between power and wisdom, between force and justice. His reign, while full of triumphs, was also marked by a moment of reflection as he grappled with the immense responsibility of his position. The story of Zeus is one of slow, steady progression, a reminder that true power is not gained through sudden bursts of strength, but through careful planning, alliances, and the realization of one's destiny over time. His rise is a metaphor for the way that greatness is often built, not in an instant, but over time, with patience and persistence. The story of Heracles is one of the most iconic in all of Greek mythology. His name is synonymous with strength and heroism, yet his path to greatness was not an easy or straightforward one. The labors he was assigned, often seen as feats of extraordinary physical prowess, were in fact trials that tested not only his body but also his spirit. These tasks, given to him by King Eurystheus, were meant to be impossible, designed to break him. However, it is in Heracles' endurance, in his persistence, and in his quiet determination to overcome all obstacles that we find the true essence of his heroism. His journey is one of transformation, of facing seemingly insurmountable challenges with calm resolve, and of realizing that true greatness is forged not just through strength, but through perseverance. Heracles, whose birth was marked by the union of Zeus and the mortal Alcmene, was destined for greatness from the moment of his conception. Yet his life was also one of tragedy and hardship. Hera, the queen of the gods, who was often vengeful toward the mortal women whom Zeus favored, despised Heracles from the beginning. When he was an infant, she sent 2 serpents to his cradle, hoping to kill him. But even in his infancy, Heracles displayed the immense strength that would define his life. He strangled the serpents with his bare hands, an early sign of his power and his future struggles. Despite his strength and divine heritage, Heracles' life was not one of ease. As he grew, he committed an act of violence that caused him to fall out of favor with the gods. Driven mad by Hera, he killed his own wife and children, an act for which he was deeply remorseful. As punishment, he was ordered to complete 12 labors, tasks that were beyond any ordinary mortal's capacity. These labors were not just physical trials. They were symbolic tests of Heracles' inner strength and his ability to endure great suffering for the sake of redemption. The first of these labors was to slay the Nemean lion, a creature whose skin was impervious to weapons. This task might seem simple on the surface, but Heracles had to use not only his great strength, but also his wits to defeat the beast. He was not a god who could rely solely on divine powers. He had to adapt, to think beyond his immediate physical abilities. By strangling the lion with his bare hands and using its own claws to skin it, he proved that strength alone was not enough to overcome the challenges life throws at us. Sometimes it requires both force and creativity. The second labor, slaying the 9-headed Hydra, was even more difficult. Every time Heracles cut off one of the Hydra's heads, two more would grow in its place. This labor, more than any other, showed the ongoing nature of his struggle. For every victory, there seemed to be another challenge, another head to deal with. Yet Heracles did not give up. With the help of his nephew, Iolaus, he managed to burn the stumps of the decapitated heads, preventing them from regrowing. The Hydra was a creature of many heads, much like the challenges in life, where one problem seems to give birth to many others. But Heracles' persistence, his refusal to accept defeat, allowed him to conquer it. The third labor took Heracles to the Ceryneian hind, a creature so fast that it was almost impossible to catch. This labor was not one of physical combat, but of patience and endurance. Heracles pursued the hind for a full year, learning that sometimes strength alone is not enough. Sometimes, the key to overcoming a challenge is the willingness to endure for as long as it takes. This task was about perseverance, the kind of quiet strength that doesn't necessarily make noise or draw attention, but instead endures over time, silently and steadily. In the fourth labor, Heracles was tasked with capturing the Erymanthian boar. This was another creature of great strength, but unlike the Hydra, it was not immortal. The hunt for the boar was not just a test of physical strength. It was a test of Heracles' ability to strategize and outsmart his prey. He trapped the boar in deep snow, exhausting it until it could no longer fight back. This labor was a reminder that true strength lies not only in raw power, but in the ability to think ahead and be patient. The fifth labor required Heracles to clean the Augean stables in a single day. These stables, which housed thousands of cattle, had not been cleaned in years. The task seemed impossible, an overwhelming amount of work to be completed in a single day. But Heracles, ever resourceful, found a way. He diverted the course of two rivers, using their waters to wash away the filth. This labor demonstrated Heracles' ingenuity and his willingness to use whatever resources were at his disposal. Sometimes, the greatest strength is not in brute force, but in the ability to think outside the box and find creative solutions to seemingly impossible problems. The sixth labor, the Stymphalian birds, involved slaying a flock of aggressive, man-eating birds. These birds were difficult to kill because they could fly and attack from above. However, Heracles' quiet determination prevailed once again. He used a rattle given to him by Athena to scare the birds into the air, where he could shoot them down. This labor demonstrated Heracles' ability to remain calm and focused, even in the face of danger. He didn't rush. He didn't panic. He allowed his tools and his mind to guide him to victory. Heracles' labors continued, each one more challenging than the last, but they were also opportunities for him to grow, to evolve, and to learn. With each labor, he became more than just a hero. He became a symbol of what it means to face adversity with grace and perseverance. His labors were not just about defeating monsters or capturing creatures. They were about confronting the dark, difficult parts of himself and emerging from them stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. The final two labors, retrieving the belt of Hippolyta, the queen of the Amazons, and stealing the cattle of the monster Geryon, further illustrated Heracles' ability to balance strength with diplomacy, cunning, and patience. Each task required a different set of skills and qualities, showing that heroism is not one-dimensional. It is not just about physical strength or battle prowess. It is about the ability to face many different challenges with courage, wisdom, and a willingness to evolve. Heracles' 12 labors were more than just tasks. They were the building blocks of his transformation. He started as a man who had committed a terrible crime and was burdened by guilt, but through each labor, he redeemed himself. His journey was one of growth, of facing obstacles not just from without, but from within. In the end, Heracles achieved immortality, but not through divine birth or the typical means of the gods. He achieved it through his actions, through his determination, his willingness to struggle, and his ability to face life's challenges head-on, with both strength and grace. Heracles' story is one of transformation and redemption, a hero's journey that takes him through immense trials, both external and internal. His labors are symbolic of the challenges we all face in life, the seemingly impossible tasks that test our resolve and our character. But through them, we learn that true strength is not just physical. It is the strength to persevere, to remain calm in the face of adversity, and keep moving forward, no matter how difficult the journey may seem. The story of Narcissus, while seemingly simple at first glance, delves deeply into the complexities of human nature. It is a myth that explores themes of self-love, vanity, and the consequences of excessive self-reflection. Narcissus's tale, though tragic, offers an important lesson: the danger of becoming too consumed with oneself, of losing touch with the world and people around you in the process. Yet, it is also a story about the profound effect that our inner world, the way we see ourselves, can have on the course of our lives. In this myth, we see the tension between self-awareness and self-obsession, a theme that resonates far beyond the boundaries of mythology. Narcissus, in Greek mythology, was a beautiful young man, the son of the river god Cephissus and the nymph Liriope. From the moment of his birth, it was clear that he was destined for greatness, not in terms of heroism or achievement, but in beauty. His physical appearance was so striking that it drew the admiration of all who encountered him. His beauty became both his gift and his curse, for while it brought him admiration, it also isolated him. Narcissus was so focused on his own image that he paid little attention to the world around him, including the love and affection of others. As a young man, Narcissus became the object of affection for many, both mortal and divine. The most notable of these was the nymph Echo, who, like Narcissus, was cursed by the gods. Echo had been punished by Hera, who had taken away her ability to speak, leaving her only able to repeat the last words spoken to her. Echo fell deeply in love with Narcissus, captivated by his beauty, but when she approached him, Narcissus rejected her without a second thought. His disdain for Echo was not just cruelty, it was a reflection of his inability to see beyond himself. He could not fathom how anyone could love him for anything other than his appearance, and so he turned away from her. Echo, heartbroken and rejected, wandered off, slowly fading away until nothing remained but her voice. Narcissus's rejection of Echo was only the beginning of his downward spiral. He was a figure consumed by his own reflection, unable to see the world beyond his own desires. He was often seen gazing at his reflection in the waters of a stream, mesmerized by the beauty he saw there. His fascination with his own image became an obsession. He was so enraptured by the sight of himself that he could not tear himself away. He was lost in the allure of his own reflection, unable to differentiate between his image and reality. In many ways, Narcissus's story is an allegory for the dangers of self-obsession, for the perilous journey of being too preoccupied with one's own image or perception. In Narcissus's case, his obsession with his own beauty led him to neglect the world outside, to dismiss the love of others, and to become increasingly isolated. In his pursuit of the perfect reflection, he became blind to everything else. He was trapped in an endless cycle of admiration for his own image, never able to reach out and connect with the world beyond the water's edge. But Narcissus's tragedy did not end with mere self-obsession. The gods, recognizing his inability to love anyone but himself, decided to punish him. Nemesis, the goddess of retribution, saw the depth of Narcissus's arrogance and decided that he must pay for his vanity. She led him to the same stream where he had often gazed upon his reflection. There, Narcissus once again saw his own image in the water and once more fell in love with it. However, this time there was no escape. Unable to look away, Narcissus became so entranced by his reflection that he could not leave. In his obsession, he withered away, unable to sustain himself, and eventually died beside the stream, unable to separate himself from the image he had so deeply fallen in love with. In his death, Narcissus's transformation was complete. Where once he had been a beautiful young man, now he was a flower, the narcissus, which still grows by the water's edge to this day. The flower, known for its delicate white petals and its tendency to bend toward the water, symbolizes both the allure and the danger of self-love. The narcissus flower, in its bending toward the water, serves as a reminder of the destructive power of excessive self-absorption. Narcissus's death is not just a punishment, but a reflection of the consequences of being unable to break free from one's own image, from the self-imposed prison of vanity and obsession. While the story of Narcissus is a cautionary tale about the dangers of vanity, it is also a story about the power of self-awareness and the consequences of losing sight of what truly matters. Narcissus was not inherently evil. He was simply a young man who could not escape the allure of his own image. His story serves as a reminder that while self-reflection is important, it is equally vital to remain connected to the world around us, to those who love us, and to the life we are meant to live. In his inability to see beyond himself, Narcissus missed out on the love of Echo and potential for true connection. His beauty, once a gift, became his curse because it drew him inward, away from the world of others. Narcissus's tragedy again invites us to reflect on our own relationship with self-image. In a world where appearances often take precedence, where social media and the pressures of modern life encourage a constant cycle of self-comparison, Narcissus's story becomes ever more relevant. The myth of Narcissus is a timeless reminder that while it is natural to care about how we are perceived, we must also be mindful not to become consumed by our own reflections, not to lose ourselves in pursuit of external validation. In the modern world, it is easy to see echoes of Narcissus in our own lives. How often do we find ourselves lost in the mirror or in the images we project to others, at the expense of true connection? Narcissus's fate is a reminder that we must strive for balance, to look inward to understand ourselves, but never to the exclusion of the world around us. We must be careful not to become so consumed by our own image that we lose sight of the beauty of the world beyond us. As we reflect on the myth of Narcissus, we are reminded that true love, true connection, comes not from the admiration of our own image, but from the relationships we cultivate with others. Narcissus's downfall was his inability to love anyone but himself, and in the end he paid the price for it. His story is a sobering reminder that beauty, while captivating, is fleeting. It is our connections with others, our ability to look beyond ourselves, that gives life its true meaning and depth. The story of Oedipus, perhaps one of the most tragic and complex tales in Greek mythology, is a profound exploration of fate, free will, and the inescapable nature of prophecy. It is a tale that questions the extent to which we control our lives and the consequences of defying fate, as well as the limits of human understanding when faced with the greatest truths of existence. Oedipus's life, filled with moments of heroism, pride, and intellect, ultimately unravels in a heartbreaking revelation of the tragic power of destiny. His tale is not just about a king who unknowingly fulfills an ancient prophecy, but about the nature of human struggle and the inevitable consequences of fate. The story begins with prophecy foretold by the Oracle of Delphi, one of the most respected sources of divine wisdom in ancient Greece. The prophecy stated that Oedipus, the son of King Laius and Queen Jocasta of Thebes, would grow up to kill his father and marry his mother. In an attempt to prevent this prophecy from coming true, Laius and Jocasta made a desperate decision. They ordered the infant Oedipus to be abandoned on a mountainside, hoping that he would die and thus avoid the fulfillment of the terrible fate that awaited him. This tragic decision, however, would set the stage for a life that would be marked by confusion, tragedy, and the dark forces of fate. But fate, as it often does in Greek mythology, had other plans. Oedipus was found by a shepherd who took him to the royal family of Corinth, where he was adopted by King Polybus and Queen Merope. Raised as the heir to the throne of Corinth, Oedipus grew up unaware of his true parentage, believing himself to be the legitimate son of Polybus and Merope. He was a proud and capable young man, admired for his intellect and strength. However, the shadow of the prophecy hung over him, even though he did not yet know it. When Oedipus grew older, he learned of the prophecy from the Oracle of Delphi. The oracle's words haunted him. "You will kill your father and marry your mother." Determined to avoid this fate, Oedipus made a vow to never return to Corinth, believing that by leaving the city, he could escape the prophecy's grasp. He left Corinth, not realizing that by fleeing from his supposed parents, he was inadvertently fulfilling the prophecy. In his mind, he was taking control of his future, exercising his free will to avoid the tragic end foretold. However, fate had already begun to weave its web, pulling him ever closer to the fulfillment of the prophecy. On his journey, Oedipus encountered his biological father, King Laius, though neither of them recognized the other. In a fit of rage on the road, they quarreled over who had the right of way. Oedipus, in a violent outburst, killed Laius, fulfilling the first part of prophecy, the murder of his father, though he was unaware of his identity. This event, a seemingly random act of self-defense, would set into motion a series of events that would culminate in the most tragic revelation of all. Soon after this incident, Oedipus arrived in Thebes, a city suffering from a terrible curse. The city was plagued by the Sphinx, a monstrous creature that terrorized the people by posing an impossible riddle. What walks on 4 legs in the morning, 2 at noon, and 3 in the evening? Anyone who could not answer the riddle was killed. Oedipus, with his renowned intelligence, solved the riddle, revealing that the answer was man, a being who crawls on all 4s as a child, walks on 2 legs as an adult, and uses a cane in old age. His cleverness earned him the admiration of the people, and he was hailed as a hero. In gratitude, Oedipus was made king of Thebes and was given the hand of Queen Jocasta, his biological mother, in marriage. At first, Oedipus was overjoyed by his newfound power and family. He ruled Thebes with wisdom and strength, seeking to rid the city of its misfortune. He vowed to find the cause of the plague and restore balance to his kingdom. His determination to protect his people and his kingdom made him beloved, but it also unwittingly set him on a path toward the discovery of the truth he was not ready to face. As Oedipus searched for the cause of the plague, he learned that the city was cursed because the murder of King Laius had not been brought to justice. Unbeknownst to him, he was the murderer. Oedipus's search for truth, which had begun with the noblest of intentions, gradually unraveled the dark web of fate that he had already set in motion. As the investigation continued, Oedipus was confronted with the possibility that he himself was the killer he sought. Despite his initial disbelief and resistance, the evidence began to mount against him, and the tragic truth slowly became clear. The revelation came in a devastating rush. Oedipus learned that he had killed his father, Laius, and married his mother, Jocasta. The realization was overwhelming, not just because of the horrifying nature of the prophecy's fulfillment, but because of the profound sense of helplessness it instilled in him. Throughout his life, Oedipus had believed that he could escape his fate through his own actions, that by exercising his free will, he could defy the will of the gods. But in the end, it was clear that fate was not something that could be avoided. The prophecy, no matter how hard he tried to evade it, had always been waiting for him. The tragedy of Oedipus lies not only in fulfillment of the prophecy, but in the painful recognition that no matter how hard he fought, he could never escape his fate. He had tried to outrun destiny, to make choices that would lead him away from disaster, but it was all in vain. His attempts to exert control over his life were futile in the face of the cosmic forces that govern the universe. His story serves as a powerful reminder of the limits of human knowledge and power, and the inevitability of fate. In response to the revelation, Jocasta, his mother and wife, is consumed by grief and horror. Unable to cope with the truth, she takes her own life. Oedipus, overcome with guilt and despair, blinds himself in an act of self-punishment, using the pins from Jocasta's robes. His physical blindness is symbolic of his earlier ignorance, of his inability to see the truth until it was too late. His suffering is a direct consequence of his relentless pursuit of truth, a pursuit that ultimately revealed the devastating nature of his fate. After his self-inflicted blindness, Oedipus leaves Thebes, a broken man. He wanders into exile, taking with him the weight of his tragic past. His tale, while ending in personal ruin, is also one of self-awareness. By the end of his journey, Oedipus comes to understand the role of fate in his life. He is no longer the proud and confident king he once was, but a man who has learned the painful truth of his existence. The tragedy of Oedipus is a poignant exploration of the tension between fate and free will. It is a story that asks profound questions about the limits of human agency. Can we truly control our destinies, or are we all subject to forces beyond our understanding? Oedipus's fate was sealed long before he was born, and no matter how much he tried to escape it, he could not. His story suggests that, in the end, fate is an inescapable force that shapes our lives in ways we may never fully understand. The myth of Oedipus serves as a reminder of the fragility of human life, the unpredictability of fate, and the dangers of pride and hubris. Oedipus, despite his intellect and his efforts to do good, was powerless in the face of his own destiny. His story is a tragedy not just because of the horror of his actions, but because of the realization that fate, no matter how much we try to resist it, always has the final say. The myth of Persephone is one of the most poignant and rich stories in Greek mythology. It is a tale that explores themes of transformation, the cyclical nature of life, and the enduring relationship between mother and daughter. At its core, it is a myth about loss and renewal, about the changing of seasons and the eternal balance between light and dark. Persephone's journey, from her abduction to her eventual return to the earth, mirrors the cycles of nature itself, offering a timeless reflection on the transitions we all experience in life, from innocence to maturity, from separation to reunion, and from death to rebirth. Persephone was a daughter of Demeter, the goddess of the harvest and agriculture, and Zeus, the king of the gods. As a goddess of fertility and growth, Demeter's domain was the earth itself, and her bond with her daughter Persephone was one of deep, nurturing love. Persephone, young and vibrant, flourished in the world above, spending her days in the company of flowers and the warmth of the sun. She was a goddess of springtime, embodying youth, beauty, and the blossoming life of the earth. Her mother, Demeter, cherished Persephone above all, and the two shared a close, protective relationship. The earth flourished under Demeter's care, and all seemed to be in balance in the world. However, this harmony was shattered when Hades, the god of the underworld, gazed upon Persephone and became smitten with her beauty. Hades, ruling over the realm of the dead, was a god of darkness and shadows, and his domain was one of solitude and desolation. He was often depicted as stern and unyielding, and unlike his brother Zeus, he did not seek to mingle with the gods of the sky or the earth. But when he saw Persephone, he was struck by her beauty and decided to make her his queen. It was a love born not of mutual affection, but of his own desire to claim her. One day, while Persephone was wandering the field, gathering flowers, Hades emerged from the earth in his chariot, drawn by black horses. Without warning, he abducted Persephone, taking her to the underworld. Persephone's screams echoed through the air, but they were in vain, for no one could hear her cries. She was taken against her will, forcibly removed from the earth above, and plunged into the depths of the underworld. When Demeter learned of her daughter's abduction, she was stricken with grief. In her sorrow, Demeter withdrew from the earth, abandoning her duties as the goddess of the harvest. She wandered the world in search of Persephone, refusing to allow anything to grow or flourish while her daughter was missing. Crops withered, and famine spread across the earth as Demeter's mourning turned the seasons into a barren wasteland. The once vibrant world now lay cold and desolate, a reflection of the goddess's broken heart. As the earth withered, so too did the spirits of the people who depended on her gifts. They cried out to the gods for mercy, for relief from the famine that had gripped the world. The gods, seeing the devastation caused by Demeter's grief, urged Zeus to intervene. However, Zeus was caught between his duties as king of the gods and his relationship with his brother Hades. After much deliberation, Zeus sent the messenger god Hermes to the underworld to negotiate Persephone's return. Hades, however, was unwilling to release his new queen so easily. He offered Persephone a pomegranate, a symbol of the underworld and of death, to eat. Persephone, unaware of the significance of fruit, accepted and ate 6 seeds of the pomegranate. In doing so, she unknowingly bound herself to the underworld. When Hermes returned with Persephone, Demeter was overjoyed to see her daughter once more, but her happiness was short-lived. Persephone's consumption of the pomegranate meant that she could not remain with her mother forever. The balance of the world, it seemed, required a balance between life and death. Persephone would have to return to the underworld for part of the year, becoming the queen of the dead, but she would also spend part of the year with her mother, returning to the world of the living and the fertile earth. This myth, while tragic in its telling, is also a symbol of the cycles of life and death. Persephone's descent into the underworld represents the winter months, when the earth lies dormant and cold. Her return to the earth, when she reunites with her mother, symbolizes the coming of spring and the renewal of life. The earth, like Persephone herself, undergoes a transformation as she spends her time in both the world of the living and the world of the dead. The myth reflects the eternal cycles of nature, birth, death, and rebirth, with the changing season serving as a metaphor for the ebb and flow of life itself. The cycle of Persephone's journey, her descent into the underworld, and her eventual return also reflects the broader human experience. Just as Persephone must leave her mother for part of the year, we too must go through periods of darkness, separation, and loss. However, as Persephone's return marks the return of life and growth, it also reminds us that after every period of hardship, there is a potential for renewal and transformation. Life is marked by both light and dark, and it is only through experiencing both that we are able to grow and evolve. Persephone's myth also embodies a theme of transformation. As a goddess of spring, she represents the innocence of youth, but as the queen of the underworld, she embodies the complexity of the darker aspects of life. Her journey is a process of becoming, of stepping into her power and understanding the duality of existence. In the underworld, she is no longer the naive girl she once was. She becomes a queen, a ruler of the dead, and a figure who embodies the balance between life and death. For Demeter, the loss of her daughter and her eventual return symbolizes the painful but necessary cycles of motherhood. Her grief over Persephone's abduction reflects the universal experience of loss and the fear of separation from a loved one. But Demeter's acceptance of Persephone's return and the understanding that her daughter must spend part of the year in the underworld reflects the bittersweet nature of love. Love, in its truest form, involves letting go, allowing for growth, and accepting that those we love must sometimes endure difficult transitions in order to fulfill their destiny. The myth of Persephone also serves as a powerful reminder of the interconnectedness of all things. Life and death are not separate and opposing forces, but are interdependent, each giving rise to the other. Persephone's time in the underworld allows for the rest of the world to lie dormant, making her return a time of renewal and growth. The fertility of the earth, the harvest, and the cycles of nature all hinge on this delicate balance. Persephone's dual role as both the queen of the underworld and the goddess of spring shows that life is not linear, but cyclical, with death leading to rebirth and darkness giving way to light. In the end, Persephone's myth is one of hope and resilience. Despite the trauma of her abduction, Persephone is not a passive figure in her story. She transforms from a victim to a powerful figure who rules over the underworld. Her journey reflects the importance of embracing both the light and dark aspects of life, understanding that both are necessary for growth. Her story teaches us that even in our moments of deepest sorrow, there is a potential for transformation, renewal, and the eventual return of joy. The myth of Orpheus and Eurydice is one of the most poignant tales in Greek mythology, a story that speaks deeply about the themes of love, loss, and the enduring power of music. At the heart of this myth is Orpheus, the greatest of all mortal musicians, whose music was so beautiful they could charm anyone, even inanimate objects. His ability to play and sing captivated the gods themselves, and his music had the power to soothe the most troubled hearts and stir even the most stoic spirits. Yet, despite Orpheus's great gifts, the myth of his life is defined by tragedy. The love he shared with his wife Eurydice, and the loss of that love, would lead him on a journey into the very depths of the underworld. Orpheus was the son of Apollo, the god of music, and the muse Calliope, which made him an extraordinary musician from the moment he was born. His talent was unparalleled, and his music had the ability to move both gods and mortals. It is said that he could make the trees sway, the rivers stop flowing, and the animals follow him as if enchanted by his melodies. With his lyre in hand, Orpheus was a figure of harmony and peace, his music bringing joy and solace to all who heard it. He became a renowned figure, traveling far and wide, performing for both the gods and mortals alike. Orpheus's life, however, was not without its challenges. He fell deeply in love with Eurydice, a beautiful nymph, and the two were married. Their love was passionate and true, and for a time they were inseparable, a symbol of the perfect union between two souls. Their love was a harmonious balance, much like Orpheus's music, beautiful, pure, and full of promise. However, this idyllic existence was destined to be short-lived. One fateful day, as Eurydice was walking through a meadow, she was bitten by a venomous snake and died instantly. The world that had once been so full of love and beauty for Orpheus was suddenly shattered. He was inconsolable, his heartbroken music turning into mournful wails of grief. In his sorrow, Orpheus vowed that he would never love again. The depth of Orpheus's despair was so great that he sought to do the impossible, to bring Eurydice back from the dead. His grief-driven determination led him to the underworld, a dark and treacherous realm that no mortal had ever returned from. Orpheus's music, however, was so powerful that it even moved the rulers of the underworld, Hades and Persephone. When Orpheus arrived in the underworld, he played his lyre and sang a song so moving that even the hearts of the dead were stirred. The spirits of the underworld, and even the gods who ruled it, were moved by the beauty of his music. It was said that the rivers of the underworld ceased flowing, the Furies softened, and the three-headed dog Cerberus lay down at his feet. His music, which had always been a source of comfort and joy, now became a plea to reunite him with his lost love. Moved by Orpheus's sorrow and his devotion to Eurydice, Hades and Persephone agreed to allow him to bring her back to the world of the living. But there was one condition. Orpheus must lead Eurydice out of the underworld without looking back at her until they had both reached the surface. If he looked back before reaching the light of day, Eurydice would be lost in forever. It was a test of trust and patience, one that would ultimately prove too much for Orpheus. With his heart filled with hope and fear, Orpheus began the journey back to the world of the living, with Eurydice following behind him. As they made their way through the dark, oppressive tunnels of the underworld, Orpheus could feel his wife's presence behind him, her footsteps echoing in the shadows. But with every step, his doubt grew. Was she really there? Was she really following him? Or was it just a trick of his mind, a cruel mirage of his longing? The journey seemed endless, the darkness suffocating. Every step Orpheus took was filled with the fear that he might lose her once again. At the final threshold, just as they were about to reach the light of the world above, Orpheus could not resist the urge to look back. He turned, his heart filled with a desperate need to see Eurydice, to confirm that she was truly with him. But as his gaze fell upon her, just before she could step into the light, she vanished, swallowed back into the depths of the underworld. Her fate was sealed. Orpheus's mistake, though born from love and longing, had cost him everything. Eurydice was lost to him forever, and no amount of music, no amount of sorrow, could change that fact. Orpheus's grief after the second loss of Eurydice was overwhelming. He wandered the earth in a daze, consumed by his pain and unable to escape the memories of his love. He turned away from the company of mortals, renouncing love and any further relationships. His music, once a source of joy, now became a mournful expression of sorrow, and he vowed never to love again. His devotion to Eurydice, his inability to forgive himself for his fatal mistake, led him to reject the love of all others. In the end, Orpheus met his tragic fate. While he wandered the wilderness, still playing his hauntingly beautiful music, he was surrounded by a group of Maenads, followers of Dionysus, the god of wine and ecstasy, who were enraged by his refusal to honor any other love but Eurydice. The Maenads, intoxicated with madness and fury, tore Orpheus apart, leaving only his head and his lyre behind. It is said that even in death, Orpheus's head continued to sing, and his lyre played on, carried by the winds. His music became a symbol of the eternal nature of his love for Eurydice and the tragic consequences of his actions. The myth of Orpheus and Eurydice is ultimately a story about the power of love, the consequences of doubt, and the destructive force of grief. It speaks to the human experience of loss, the difficulty of letting go, the desire to turn back time, and the painful realization that some things cannot be undone. Orpheus's love for Eurydice was so deep and pure that it led him to challenge the very laws of life and death. Yet, in his inability to trust the process, in his failure to believe in the promise of the gods, he lost her again. The story also highlights the power of music as a force that transcends even the realm of the dead. Orpheus's music is a symbol of his soul, his heart laid bare for all to hear. His music had the power to move the gods, to charm the dead, and to heal the most broken of hearts. It reminds us that music, and art in general, is a form of expression that can bridge the gap between the living and the dead, the real and the imagined, the light and the dark. In a deeper sense, the myth of Orpheus and Eurydice is also a meditation on the nature of human longing and the futility of attempting to change the past. It suggests that while love is a force of great power, it is not always enough to change the course of destiny. Orpheus's tragic fate, his inability to move forward, and his constant yearning for what he lost, reflects the danger of becoming consumed by past regrets. The myth teaches that, while love may be eternal, we must also learn to let go, to trust the journey, and to find peace in the face of loss. The myth of Orpheus and Eurydice is a timeless story, one that speaks to the heart of human experience. It is a story of love, loss, and the deep emotional resonance of music, capturing the pain and beauty of the human condition. Orpheus's journey is a poignant reminder of the fragility of life and the transformative power of love, art, an inevitable passage of time. The myth of Theseus and the Minotaur is one of the most famous and enduring tales in Greek mythology. It is a story that embodies the themes of heroism, sacrifice, and the battle between light and darkness. At its heart, it is about overcoming seemingly insurmountable challenges, confronting one's fears, and the ultimate triumph of intellect and courage over brute force. Theseus, the hero of the story, faces an impossible task, navigating a labyrinthine maze in order to confront a monstrous creature that has terrorized the land. But in many ways, his journey is also one of self-discovery, a test of character that reveals both the strengths and weaknesses of the human spirit. The story begins in Athens, a city famed for its culture, intellect, and strength, but also marked by its vulnerability. At the time, the Athenians were at odds with King Minos of Crete, a powerful and tyrannical ruler who sought to exert his dominance over the Greek world. After a series of conflicts, Minos demanded that Athens send 7 young men and 7 young women every 9 years to be sacrificed to the Minotaur, a fearsome creature that resided in the labyrinth, a vast and intricate maze built by the legendary craftsman Daedalus. The Minotaur, half man and half bull, was the offspring of Pasiphae, Minos' wife, and a sacred bull sent by the gods. The creature's insatiable hunger led to the regular tribute of human lives, and this gruesome custom weighed heavily on the people of Athens, who lived in constant fear of the annual sacrifice. For many years, the Athenians sent their youth to the Minotaur without question, a grim fate that had become an accepted part of their lives. But as the next sacrificial round approached, the people's despair grew. Among the victims chosen for sacrifice was none other than the Athenian prince, Theseus, the son of King Aegeus. Though Theseus had grown up hearing tales of the Minotaur's terror and the cruelty of King Minos, he was determined not to allow his people to suffer any longer. His sense of duty to his city and his desire to prove himself as a hero were powerful motivators. Despite the gravity of the situation, Theseus was not driven purely by duty. He was fueled by a sense of idealism and a strong desire to end the cycle of death and sacrifice that had plagued Athens for so long. His decision to volunteer for the deadly mission was not just a matter of political necessity, but also a deeply personal challenge. By offering himself as one of the victims, Theseus hoped not only to save the lives of others, but to bring an end to the terror that the Minotaur had cast over Athens. His willingness to face the creature head-on demonstrated both courage and a sense of moral responsibility that would define him as a hero in the eyes of the people. Before he departed for Crete, Theseus' father, King Aegeus, begged him to return safely and promised to raise white sails on his ship if Theseus was victorious. If, however, he was killed by the Minotaur, Aegeus would know from the black sails that his son had met with an untimely death. Theseus, ever determined, assured his father that he would return with honor, and he set sail with the other youths. Upon arriving in Crete, Theseus was greeted by Princess Ariadne, the daughter of King Minos. Ariadne, struck by Theseus' bravery and resolve, fell in love with him instantly. She could not bear to see him face the Minotaur without hope, and so she decided to help him. She sought out Daedalus, the creator of the labyrinth, and managed to obtain a ball of thread, which she gave to Theseus. She instructed him to unravel the thread as he journeyed through the labyrinth, ensuring that he could find his way back out after confronting the beast. In this act of kindness and courage, Ariadne became an unlikely ally in Theseus' quest. The labyrinth, as Daedalus had designed it, was an intricate and confusing structure designed to trap anyone who entered. It was said that once inside, one could never find their way out, and many had perished trying to escape. Yet, armed with Ariadne's thread, Theseus was able to navigate the maze. As he ventured deeper into the labyrinth, the darkness and silence weighed heavily on him. He could hear the distant sounds of the Minotaur echoing through the maze, and his heart raced with anticipation. His journey through the labyrinth became a test of endurance and wits, a struggle not just against the creature that awaited him, but also against the psychological pressures of isolation and fear. When he finally encountered the Minotaur, the creature was more terrifying than Theseus had imagined. Its massive, muscular form and fierce bull-like head towered over him, its eyes glowing with hunger and rage. The battle between Theseus and the Minotaur was fierce and brutal, but Theseus, relying on his strength and intellect, was able to defeat the creature. With a final, powerful strike. He killed the Minotaur, ending the terror that had plagued Athens for so long. He quickly retraced his steps to the labyrinth, following the thread that Ariadne had given him, and emerged victorious. With the Minotaur slain, Theseus freed the other Athenian youths and prepared to return home. Ariadne, who had helped him, wished to accompany him back to Athens, but Theseus's fate would take a tragic turn. On their journey back, Theseus and Ariadne stopped on the island of Naxos, where Theseus, for reasons unknown, abandoned her. The details of why Theseus left Ariadne vary in different versions of the myth, but the act of abandoning her would later become one of the most tragic and criticized aspects of his character. Some say that he was advised by the gods to leave her, while others suggest that he simply lost interest in her. Regardless of the reason, Ariadne was left alone, heartbroken, and abandoned on the island. It was there that the god Dionysus, god of wine, ecstasy, and revelry, found Ariadne. He took her as his wife, and she became a goddess, often associated with the eternal and joyful aspects of life. While Theseus' abandonment of Ariadne marked a dark moment in his story, it is also a reminder that the gods, too, had their hands in human affairs, shaping the destinies of mortals in unexpected ways. Theseus, meanwhile, returned to Athens, where he was hailed as a hero for killing the Minotaur. However, the story does not end with his triumph. As he sailed home, Theseus had forgotten to change the sails of his ship from black to white. When King Aegeus saw the black sails on the horizon, he assumed the worst and, in his grief, threw himself into the sea. His death marked the end of an era for Athens and would come to be known as the Aegean Sea in his honor. Theseus, despite his victory and heroism, would be forever haunted by the loss of his father, a consequence of his own mistake. The myth of Theseus and the Minotaur is not just a tale of heroism. It is also one of fate and consequence. It speaks to the complexity of human choices, the thin line between success and failure, and the unpredictable nature of life. Theseus' journey was marked by both triumph and tragedy. His victory over Minotaur was a moment of immense glory, but the abandonment of Ariadne and the death of his father were reminders of the unpredictable and sometimes cruel twists of fate. It is a story that reflects the often contradictory nature of the human condition, our capacity for greatness and our tendency to make mistakes, the desire to overcome challenges, and the inevitable cost of our actions. In many ways, Theseus represents the archetypal hero, courageous, intelligent, and willing to face danger for the greater good. But like many heroes of Greek mythology, his story is also one of moral complexity. His actions, while heroic, were not without consequences, and the myth of Theseus and the Minotaur ultimately serves as a reminder that even the greatest heroes are not exempt from the laws of fate and consequence. The myth of Pandora's box is one of the most compelling and thought-provoking stories in Greek mythology. It is a tale that explores the consequences of curiosity, the nature of human suffering, and the enduring power of hope. The myth centers on Pandora, the first woman created by the gods in the infamous box or jar she was given, which contained all the evils of the world. It is a story about the dangers of unchecked curiosity, the complexities of human existence, and the unforeseen consequences of actions, even when those actions are driven by innocence or ignorance. At its core, the myth reminds us of the dual nature of the human experience, how suffering and hope coexist in the world. Pandora was created by the gods as a part of a larger plan to punish humanity. According to the myth, the gods were angered by the theft of fire by Prometheus, the titan who defied Zeus to bring the gift of fire to mankind. As punishment for Prometheus' defiance, Zeus decided to create a being who would bring misfortune to humanity. From this, Pandora was born. She was created by Hephaestus, the god of craftsmanship, and given gifts from all the gods: beauty from Aphrodite, wisdom from Athena, charm from Hermes, and a voice that could enchant anyone. Each of the gods contributed to her creation, making her a perfect and irresistible being. However, her beauty and allure masked the potential disaster she would bring. Pandora's creation was part of a grand plan devised by Zeus to punish mankind for Prometheus' defiance. While Pandora's gifts made her a beautiful and enchanting figure, there was one gift that set her apart from the others: a jar, which she was instructed not to open under any circumstances. This jar, unbeknownst to Pandora, contained all the evils and miseries that would plague humankind. disease, war, famine, jealousy, pain, and death. It was a gift designed to bring suffering to the world, a punishment for humanity's transgression in stealing fire from the gods. Despite the warning, Pandora's curiosity got the better of her. Unable to resist the temptation to know what lay inside the mysterious jar, she opened it. As soon as the lid was lifted, all the evils trapped inside the jar escaped, spreading across the world and introducing suffering, despair, and hardship into human existence. Disease, death, pain, and fear flooded the earth, and the gods had, through Pandora's actions, unleashed all the horrors of life that would torment humanity forever. As the evils poured out, Pandora, filled with regret and fear, quickly closed the jar, but it was too late. All the sufferings of the world were already unleashed. However, there was one thing that remained inside the jar: hope. This is often seen as the central lesson of the myth. While Pandora's curiosity and the opening of the jar led to the release of all the miseries of the world, hope was the one thing that remained to counterbalance the suffering. This final piece of the myth is crucial, as it suggests that even in the face of overwhelming hardship and despair, hope remains a vital force in the world. The myth of Pandora's box is a meditation on the nature of human suffering. It illustrates how, despite the best intentions or the innocent curiosity of Pandora, the world was forever altered. It speaks to the idea that suffering is an inherent part of the human condition, something that cannot be avoided or erased. The evils released from the jar, much like the challenges and pains that we experience in our own lives, cannot be undone. They are a part of life, something that each individual must learn to endure and confront. However, the inclusion of hope in the jar offers a ray of light in the darkness. Hope, the last thing to remain, symbolizes the resilience of the human spirit. Even though suffering is a part of life, so too is the possibility of redemption, of overcoming hardship, and of finding a way through even the most challenging of times. Hope gives humanity the strength to endure suffering and find meaning in the face of despair. It is through hope that people are able to rise above the hardships they face and continue to strive for a better tomorrow. The myth also reflects the complexities of curiosity. Pandora's decision to open the jar, despite the warnings, is often seen as a symbol of the human inclination toward curiosity and the desire to understand the unknown. In many ways, the myth suggests that curiosity, while an essential part of the human experience, can also lead to unintended consequences. It reminds us that the pursuit of knowledge, while important, comes with its own set of risks. Pandora's actions, though driven by innocence and curiosity, were responsible for unleashing suffering into the world. Yet, it is also through curiosity and the desire to understand that humans find solutions, create progress, and ultimately learn to cope with their struggles. The myth thus reflects the duality of curiosity. It is both a gift and a curse, a tool for growth, but also a potential source of harm. The role of the gods in the myth also highlights the tension between fate and free will. Zeus's decision to create Pandora and give her the jar was part of his plan to punish humanity for Prometheus's crime. Yet, Pandora was not a mere instrument of Zeus's will. She was a sentient being, capable of making her own choices. Her curiosity led her to open the jar, a decision that she made despite the consequences. This tension between divine intervention and human choice is central to many Greek myths, and Pandora's story reflects the complex relationship between destiny and personal agency. In addition to its themes of suffering and hope, the myth of Pandora's box also speaks to the idea of consequences. Pandora's act of opening the jar led to irrevocable changes in the world. Just as one small action can ripple through the world, creating lasting effects, Pandora's curiosity brought about a change that would affect all of humanity. The story thus serves as a reminder of the far-reaching consequences of our actions. Even when our intentions are pure or our motivations innocent, the outcomes of our choices can have profound and irreversible effects. This element of the myth urges us to consider the potential consequences before acting and to recognize the weight of our decisions. Another important aspect of the myth is its connection to the human need for meaning. Pandora's curiosity about the contents of the jar can be seen as a metaphor for the human desire to understand life's mysteries. The opening of the jar symbolizes humanity's continual search for answers, even when those answers may be difficult to bear. The suffering that follows represents a harsh truth that we often encounter in life. truths that, once revealed, cannot be ignored or undone. Yet, the presence of hope within the jar suggests that even in the face of harsh realities, we must continue searching for meaning, for understanding, and for the strength to move forward. The myth of Pandora's box, in its depth and complexity, is a reflection of the human condition itself. It is a story about the inevitability of suffering, the resilience of hope, and the complexities of human nature. It warns us of the dangers of curiosity and the consequences of our actions, while also offering a message of hope, that even in the darkest moments, there is a possibility of renewal and healing. It reminds us that suffering is a part of life, but so too is a capacity for hope, which gives us the strength to endure, to learn, and to grow. The myth of Icarus is one of the most iconic and tragic tales in Greek mythology, offering timeless lessons about the dangers of overambition, the pursuit of dreams without consideration of limitations, and the human desire to transcend earthly boundaries. It is a story of a young man who, fueled by the desire to escape and soar to unimaginable heights, disregards the wisdom of his father and the limitations of his human nature. The myth centers on Icarus, the son of Daedalus, the brilliant inventor who crafted the labyrinth for King Minos of Crete, and it is a poignant exploration of the consequences of hubris, of flying too close to the sun, both literally and metaphorically. Daedalus was one of the greatest minds in Greek mythology, a craftsman of extraordinary skill who had been tasked with designing the labyrinth that would house the monstrous Minotaur. After completing this labyrinthine prison, Daedalus and his son Icarus found themselves imprisoned by King Minos in a tower, for the king feared that the pair might reveal the secrets of the labyrinth. In order to escape, Daedalus used his genius to craft 2 pairs of wings made of feathers and wax. These wings would allow him and Icarus to fly away from Crete and avoid capture. Daedalus warned his son not to fly too low, where the dampness of the sea would weigh down the wings, nor too high, where the heat of the sun could melt the wax. He cautioned Icarus to follow him closely and to keep a steady course, as their escape depended on both their wisdom and their restraint. The flight from Crete began with great excitement and wonder. Icarus, feeling the wind beneath his wings, soared high into the sky, marveling at the freedom that flight provided. The world below appeared small, and for a moment he felt invincible, as though he had transcended the limitations of human existence. His youthful exuberance and sense of boundless possibility overwhelmed the warnings of his father. As they flew higher, Daedalus kept urging Icarus to stay at a safe altitude, but the young man, intoxicated by the sensation of flying and by the beauty of the open sky, ignored his father's advice. Icarus began to fly higher and higher, drawn toward the sun, until he was far beyond the reach of Daedalus. The sun's heat began to soften the wax, holding the feathers together. Unbeknownst to Icarus, the very force that had drawn him upward, his ambition, his youthful desire to reach the skies and push the limits of his existence, was causing the wings to deteriorate. The feathers began to come loose, and the wax began to melt. In his obsession with reaching the sun, Icarus failed to recognize the danger that was unfolding, and by the time he realized the wings were failing, it was too late. The wings disintegrated, and Icarus, now helpless, plummeted into the sea below. His fall was swift and inevitable, and he drowned in the waters that would later be named the Icarian Sea, a somber reminder of his tragic fate. The story of Icarus is one of hubris, a cautionary tale about the consequences of unchecked ambition and the human tendency to overestimate our own abilities. Icarus's fall from grace is not just a literal descent, but a symbolic one. His reckless flight towards the sun represents the folly of pursuing dreams without understanding the limitations that come with them, whether those limitations are imposed by nature, fate, or the wisdom passed down from others. The myth shows that while ambition and the desire to break free from the constraint of the world are powerful and important motivators, they must be tempered with wisdom and self-awareness. In seeking to transcend his human condition, Icarus failed to recognize that there are boundaries which should not be crossed, limits that, when ignored, lead catastrophe. In a deeper sense, the myth of Icarus also speaks to the tension between youthful idealism and the wisdom of experience. Icarus, as a young man, was filled with dreams of freedom and flight, unburdened by the caution and experience that Daedalus had accumulated over a lifetime. Daedalus, on the other hand, represented the voice of reason and experience, urging his son to be cautious and to respect the boundaries of their existence. The contrast between the two characters highlights the challenges that arise when youthful idealism clashes with the hard-won wisdom of those who have lived through the consequences of their own actions. Icarus's fall is also a metaphor for the dangers of becoming intoxicated by one's own potential. The myth shows how the pursuit of greatness, while noble in itself, can lead to a disconnection from the reality of one's situation. Icarus, in his exuberance, believed he could conquer the sky, conquer nature itself, and defy the limits imposed on mortals. This overconfidence led him to ignore the fundamental truth that he, like all humans, was bound by the limitations of the world. The sun, in this case, becomes a symbol of unattainable greatness, a goal that, while inspiring, is ultimately beyond reach for a mortal being. Icarus's attempt to reach it represents humanity's tendency to aim for something that is beyond its grasp, and the tragedy comes when pursuit of that unattainable goal leads to destruction. The tale of Icarus also brings to light the dangers of unmoderated desire. Desire, when left unchecked, can lead us to push beyond what is safe or sensible. It can make us forget the limits of our own abilities, and make us believe that we are invincible. Icarus's yearning to fly higher and higher, to transcend the limitations of the earth, is symbolic of the way in which human desire often blinds us to the consequences of our actions. His flight represents the search for freedom, for transcendence, for a way out of the constraints of daily life. But in the end, that very search for liberation leads to his downfall. The myth warns that it is not the pursuit of dreams or aspirations that is dangerous, but the failure to recognize the risks involved and the wisdom that must accompany such pursuits. In a larger philosophical context, the myth of Icarus can be interpreted as a metaphor for the human condition itself. Our constant desire to overcome our limitations, our drive to reach higher and higher, an inevitable reality that, in doing so, we sometimes fall short. It reflects the tension between human ambition and the constraints of our mortal nature. The sun, in this sense, symbolizes the ultimate aspiration, whether it be fame, power, knowledge, or spiritual enlightenment, and Icarus's fall speaks to the inevitable consequences of chasing these lofty goals without understanding the fragility of our existence. The myth also underscores the importance of balance. Daedalus, though a brilliant inventor, understood the limitations of human capabilities. He cautioned Icarus to be careful, to find a middle path between the extremes of flying too high or too low. In this way, the story illustrates that the key to a successful and meaningful life is balance, not striving for the extreme, but recognizing the value of moderation, of knowing when to push forward and when to pull back. Icarus's failure to heed his father's advice, to find that balance, ultimately led to his tragic fall. The story of Icarus has resonated throughout history because it speaks to universal human themes. It is a cautionary tale for anyone who seeks to rise above their station or to achieve greatness without acknowledging the risks. It warns of the dangers of hubris and the importance of humility. At the same time, it is a reflection on a human drive for freedom and transcendence, capturing the complex relationship between ambition, wisdom, and the fragility of existence. Icarus's tragic fate is a poignant reminder that while the desire to soar can lead to extraordinary achievements, it must always be tempered with the recognition of our limits and the wisdom to understand when to stop. In the end, the myth of Icarus teaches us that while the pursuit of greatness and transcendence is a noble endeavor, it is essential to maintain a sense of humility and awareness of our own limitations. The fall of Icarus is not just a physical descent, but a tragic consequence of ignoring the balance between ambition and wisdom, and it serves as a timeless warning to those who seek to break free from the constraint of the world without fully understanding the cost of doing so. The myth of Medea is one of the most complex and emotionally charged stories in Greek mythology, filled with themes of love, betrayal, revenge, and the devastating consequences of unchecked passion. Medea, a sorceress and the daughter of King Aetes of Colchis, is a character whose actions have long been the subject of fascination, horror, and deep philosophical reflection. Her story is a powerful exploration of the darker aspects of human emotion, the lengths to which people will go when they feel betrayed, and the tragic consequences of letting anger and hurt spiral out of control. Medea's story begins when the hero Jason arrives in Colchis with a group of Argonauts on a quest to obtain the Golden Fleece, a symbol of power and wealth. Jason is tasked with this dangerous mission by his uncle Peleus, the ruler of Iolcus, who seeks to remove Jason from the throne. In Colchis, The golden fleece is guarded by a dragon, and only the most heroic of individuals can hope to retrieve it. Medea, who is deeply skilled in magic and sorcery, falls in love with Jason at first sight. The gods, seeing the desperate nature of Jason's quest, intervene, and it is Medea who ultimately aids him in obtaining the golden fleece. Despite her deep love for Jason, Medea's actions in helping him are motivated by more than just affection. At first, her love is born out of pure passion and desire to help the man she has fallen for. But as the events of the myth unfold, it becomes clear that her attachment to Jason is not just the love of a devoted partner. It is also rooted in a desire for power, for an escape from her father's tyranny, and for a new identity beyond her life in Colchis. In helping Jason, Medea also seeks to rewrite her own fate, to transform herself from a foreign princess into a woman who can wield power and agency in her own right. After Jason successfully obtains a golden fleece with Medea's help, the two of them flee Colchis, with Medea's father in pursuit. Medea's devotion to Jason knows no bounds. She betrays her own family, killing her brother Absyrtus in the process, to ensure their escape. This brutal act is the first sign of Medea's willingness to go to extreme lengths for the man she loves, setting the stage for the darker parts of her character to emerge. Medea's love for Jason is all-consuming, and she has already sacrificed her family, her home, and her identity for him. Upon their return to Iolcus, Medea and Jason are hailed as heroes, and they are married. Medea bears Jason children, and for a time, it seems as though their life together is one of peace and happiness. But as with many myths, the peace is short-lived. Over time, Jason begins to distance himself from Medea, and his affections wane. He is tempted by the political and social advantages that a marriage to Glauce, the daughter of King Creon of Corinth, could bring him. Jason decides to abandon Medea for Glauce, seeking a new life with a wealthier and more powerful wife. This betrayal shatters Medea. The woman who once had given everything for Jason is now cast aside, replaced by another woman who represents a new future for him, a future that Medea is not part of. This moment of betrayal marks the turning point in Medea's life. The woman who once loved Jason with every fiber of her being is now consumed with rage, a rage so fierce that it seems to obliterate any remnants of the compassionate and loving woman she once was. Medea is no longer the helpless princess who fell in love with a hero. She is a woman scorned, determined to exact her revenge, no matter the cost. The transformation of Medea from loving wife to vengeful woman is one of the most unsettling aspects of her myth. Her love for Jason, which once seemed pure, now becomes a source of her destruction, twisting her emotions into something dark and dangerous. In her fury, Medea turns to her magic and her deep knowledge of sorcery to plot her revenge. She first secures an audience with King Creon, asking for one more day to prepare for her exile. The king, unaware of the depth of her anger, grants her request. Medea uses this time to carefully plan the destruction of Jason's new life. Her first act of vengeance is to send her children with a poison robe and crown to Glauce, the princess. When Glauce dons the gifts, she is consumed by the poison, and she dies in a horrific and agonizing manner. But Medea's vengeance does not end there. The ultimate act of her revenge, however, is even more horrifying. In a moment of cold-blooded cruelty, Medea kills her own children, the children she had borne with Jason, as a final act of vengeance against him. The murder of her children is a devastating and tragic moment, one that separates Medea from any sense of redemption. It is an act that is almost impossible to comprehend. How can a mother bring herself to kill her own flesh and blood? Medea's reasoning is that by killing the children, she not only punishes Jason, but she also prevents him from growing up in a world where their father would abandon them for another woman. In her mind, the children's deaths are a final act of control, a way to ensure that Jason's happiness is forever shattered. The horror of this act, combined with the fact that Medea carries out the murders with a calculated, almost detached precision, makes her one of the most tragic and morally complex figures in mythology. After committing these unspeakable acts, Medea flees Corinth in a chariot provided by the sun god Helios, her grandfather. She leaves behind the city in ruins, with Jason left to face the wreckage of his life. Medea, however, does not face the same consequences. She is not punished by the gods, nor does she suffer for her actions in any meaningful way. Instead, she escapes into exile, her revenge complete but her soul irrevocably tainted. Her actions leave a lasting scar on the mythological world, and the myth of Medea serves as a chilling reminder of the destructive power of anger, betrayal, and unchecked emotion. The story of Medea is one of the most unsettling tales in Greek mythology, and it raises difficult questions about morality, justice, and the human capacity for both love and cruelty. Medea's love for Jason, which begins as a pure and passionate emotion, transforms into something monstrous as she is betrayed by the man she once adored. Her revenge is a response to a deep sense of betrayal, but it is also a reflection of the complex and sometimes dangerous emotions that can arise when a person is pushed to the limits of their endurance. Medea's actions, while horrific, are driven by a sense of profound loss, and they reflect the lengths to which a person may go when they feel completely abandoned and powerless. Medea's story also explores the theme of justice and the ways in which the gods and fate operate within the lives of mortals. While Jason's betrayal of Medea is a moral wrong, Medea's actions in response to it are not simply justified by her pain. Instead, they are shown as an expression of the extremities of the human experience, how deep love can be twisted into the darkest of emotions when pushed to its breaking point. Her actions are not rational. They are emotional, raw, and brutal. But in the context of Greek mythology, they are also deeply human, capturing the complexities of love, betrayal, and vengeance in a way that resonates across time. In the end, Medea is a tragic figure, a woman whose love and devotion to Jason led her to unimaginable depths of pain and rage. Her story serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked emotion, the consequences of betrayal, and the complexities of human nature. Medea is not merely a villain. She is a victim of circumstance, a person whose immense love and trust were shattered by the actions of another. Her myth reminds us of the fragility of human emotions and the potentially devastating effects they can have on our lives when they are allowed to spiral out of control. The myth of Persephone is a deeply symbolic and poignant story that explores the themes of life, death, and rebirth, as well as the complex relationships between mothers and daughters. Persephone, the daughter of Demeter, the goddess of the harvest and agriculture, is at the center of a myth that not only explains the changing of the seasons, but also reflects profound truths about human existence, the cyclical nature of life, and the inevitability of change. Her journey from innocence to maturity, from life to death and back again, represents both the challenges of growing up and the perpetual cycle of renewal that governs the natural world. The myth begins with Persephone as a young and carefree goddess, beloved by her mother, Demeter. Persephone's life, in many ways, is one of light and innocence, as she is associated with the blooming flowers and fertility of the earth. She is often depicted as a symbol of spring, youthful, vibrant, and full of promise. Demeter, her mother, is fiercely protective of her daughter and takes great joy in seeing her flourish. Together, Demeter and Persephone embody the nurturing forces of nature, with Demeter ensuring that the earth remains fertile and Persephone representing the renewal and vitality of life. One day, while Persephone is gathering flowers in a field, the earth suddenly opens up and Hades, the god of the underworld, emerges from the depths. Enamored by Persephone's beauty, Hades decides to abduct her and take her to the underworld to be his queen. Persephone, frightened and confused, is unable to resist as Hades carries her away, and the earth closes behind them. Demeter, upon discovering that her daughter has vanished, is overcome with grief and sorrow. She searches the earth in a frantic quest to find Persephone, neglecting her duties as the goddess of the harvest. As a result, the earth begins to wither and die, crops fail, and the once fertile lands become barren. Demeter's sorrow reflects a profound bond between mother and daughter, and her grief is not just a personal loss. It is a cosmic one. The earth's suffering is a direct consequence of Demeter's despair. As the goddess of agriculture, Demeter's ability to make the earth fertile is tied to her emotional state, and her mourning for Persephone causes the land to become desolate. This desolation represents the death of life itself, as nature's vitality fades in the wake of Demeter's sorrow. The myth of Persephone thus speaks to the deep interconnection between human emotions, the cycles of nature, and the fundamental forces that govern life and death. Eventually, Demeter's relentless search for her daughter leads her to the god Helios, who witnesses everything that transpires on earth from his position in the sky. Helios reveals to Demeter that it was Hades who abducted Persephone, and Demeter, determined to retrieve her daughter, pleads with Zeus, the king of the gods, to intervene. Zeus, however, is unwilling to directly confront Hades, as he is bound by the agreements of the gods. Instead, Zeus sends Hermes, the messenger god, to the underworld to negotiate Persephone's return. Hades, however, is unwilling to let Persephone go without a fight. He has fallen in love with her and wishes to keep her by his side as his queen. Before Persephone leaves the underworld, Hades tricks her into eating 6 pomegranate seeds, which binds her to the underworld. In Greek mythology, eating the food of the underworld signifies a person's bond to it. The act of eating the pomegranate seeds creates a complication in Persephone's return to the world above. As a result, a compromise is reached. Persephone will spend part of the year with her mother, Demeter, in the world of the living, and the other part in the underworld with Hades. Thus, Persephone's story becomes a metaphor for the cycle of life, death, and rebirth. Each year, when Persephone descends into the underworld, the earth experiences winter, cold, barren, and lifeless. This period of absence from the earth represents the death of the natural world, a time of dormancy and stillness. However, when Persephone returns to her mother in the spring, life is renewed. The earth bursts into bloom, crops grow, and the cycle of fertility and abundance begins again. This annual cycle mirrors the seasons of the year, winter giving way to spring, death leading to rebirth, and it reflects the cyclical nature of existence itself. Persephone's myth also reflects the dual nature of her existence. As a queen of the underworld, she is a symbol of death, darkness, and inevitable passage of time. Yet, as the daughter of Demeter and the goddess of spring, she also represents life, renewal, and the beauty of growth. Her dual role as both the queen of the dead and the goddess of rebirth embodies the paradox of existence. Life cannot exist without death, and death is always followed by life. Persephone's journey between the underworld and the earth mirrors a journey all mortals must make, the passage from life to death and back again, an eternal cycle that shapes both the natural world and the human experience. At a deeper level, Persephone's myth can also be seen as a coming-of-age story. When Persephone is first abducted, she is a young and innocent goddess, unaware of the complexities of the world. Her abduction by Hades forces her to confront the darker aspects of life, death, loss, and the unknown, through her experience in the underworld. Persephone undergoes a transformation, emerging as a more mature and powerful figure. Her time in the underworld forces her to accept the reality of death and the inevitability of change, just as the changing seasons reflect the passage of time and the cycles of life. This coming-of-age aspect of Persephone's story resonates with the experiences of all individuals. Just as Persephone must grow and adapt to the reality of her divided existence, so too must humans come to terms with the inevitability of loss, change, and the passage of time. Persephone's return to the earth each year can be seen as a metaphor for the renewal of hope, for the opportunity to start anew, to heal, and to grow after periods of difficulty and despair. Her annual return is a reminder that, no matter how dark the times may seem, there is always a possibility of renewal, of light returning after the darkness, of life returning after death. Moreover, Persephone's role as a queen of the underworld also reflects the importance of embracing both life and death, light and dark, as integral parts of the human experience. Her myth teaches us that death is not something to be feared or resisted, but is instead an essential aspect of the cycle of life. The seasons, the growth of crops, the birth of new life, and the eventual decay of all things, all of these are part of the same cycle, and Persephone stands as a symbol of this profound truth. She represents the balance between the living and the dead, the cycles of growth and decay, the balance of opposites that make life whole. Ultimately, the myth of Persephone is a powerful reflection of the cyclical nature of the universe. It illustrates how the forces of life and death are inextricably linked, and how the passage of time, with all its joys and sorrows, is a necessary part of existence. Persephone's story is not just a tale about the changing seasons, but also a meditation on the human condition, the way we must learn to embrace both life and death, joy and sorrow, in order to fully understand the meaning of our existence. Her myth encourages us to see the beauty in cycles, to recognize that after every winter comes spring, and that after every period of darkness, light will return. It is a reminder that even in our darkest moments, renewal is always possible. The myth of Oedipus is one of the most enduring and tragic stories in Greek mythology, a tale that delves deeply into the complex interplay between fate, free will, and the consequences of knowledge. Oedipus, the king of Thebes, is a figure whose life is defined by a prophecy that he will kill his father and marry his mother. His story is a poignant exploration of human agency, destiny, and the destructive power of self-awareness. It is a narrative that forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about the limits of human control and the inescapable nature of fate. The story begins with King Laius and Queen Jocasta of Thebes, who, after consulting an oracle, are told that their son will eventually kill Laius and marry Jocasta. Terrified by this prophecy, the couple attempts to avert their fate by abandoning their newborn son, Oedipus, on a mountainside. However, fate is a powerful force in Greek mythology, and even the best efforts to avoid it often fail. Oedipus is found by a shepherd who, after learning of the child's royal lineage, gives him to a childless couple in Corinth. The childless couple raises Oedipus as their own, unaware of the prophecy that looms over him. As Oedipus grows up, he learns of a prophecy that he will kill his father and marry his mother. Like many tragic figures in Greek mythology, Oedipus reacts to the prophecy with a mixture of fear and determination. He chooses to leave Corinth, believing that by doing so, he can escape his fate. In a tragic twist, his decision to flee the city and avoid the prophecy sets in motion the very events he sought to prevent. In his journey to Thebes, Oedipus encounters his true father, Laius, though neither recognizes the other. A confrontation ensues, and Oedipus, in a fit of anger, kills Laius, unknowingly fulfilling the first part of the prophecy. Upon arriving in Thebes, Oedipus is hailed as a hero for solving the riddle of the Sphinx, a creature that had been terrorizing the city. The grateful people of Thebes make him their king, and Oedipus marries Jocasta, his mother, unaware of her true identity. The marriage, born out of gratitude and a shared sense of victory, is ironically the very fulfillment of the second part of prophecy. The tragedy of Oedipus lies in the devastating realization of his own actions. Over time, a plague strikes Thebes, and Oedipus, as king, seeks to find the cause of the suffering. After consulting the oracle, Oedipus learns that the plague is a result of his own actions. He has killed his father and married his mother, just as the prophecy foretold. The revelation of this truth is a crushing blow to Oedipus and to those around him. Jocasta, upon realizing the truth, takes her own life, while Oedipus, consumed by guilt and horror, blinds himself in a desperate attempt to escape the consequences of his actions. The myth of Oedipus is one of the clearest examples of the theme of fate versus free will in Greek mythology. Oedipus, despite his best efforts to avoid the prophecy, ultimately fulfills it in every detail. His actions, driven by a desire to escape his fate, only serve to bring it to fruition. This creates a sense of tragic irony, as Oedipus's attempt to outsmart the gods and avoid his destiny results in his ultimate downfall. The story suggests that, no matter how much we try to control our futures, fate will find a way to make itself known. It is a powerful reminder of the limitations of human agency and the inescapable nature of destiny. However, Oedipus's story also raises important questions about the role of free will in shaping one's life. While it is clear that Oedipus is destined to fulfill the prophecy, his actions in response to the prophecy are driven by his own choices. Oedipus chooses to leave Corinth, to flee from the city that he believes is his home, and in doing so, he sets in motion the events that lead to his downfall. Even though his actions are ultimately futile in preventing the prophecy, they are still driven by his own will. This creates a paradox. Oedipus is both a victim of fate and an agent of his own destruction. The question of whether Oedipus's fate is predetermined or shaped by his own choices is central to the myth. It is possible to view Oedipus's actions as an exercise of free will, but the fact that he cannot escape the prophecy suggests that his fate is inescapable. In Greek mythology, the gods often shape the fates of mortals, but mortals are not entirely powerless in the face of destiny. They can make choices, but those choices often lead to their eventual ruin, as they try to escape the very fate that is destined for them. In Oedipus's case, his attempt to avoid the prophecy only bring him closer to fulfilling it. Oedipus's story also touches on the concept of knowledge and its consequences. When Oedipus first learns of the prophecy, he seeks to escape it, believing that ignorance will protect him. However, the pursuit of knowledge, in the form of his search for the truth about the plague and his own past, leads to his downfall. The revelation of his true identity, his murder of his father and his marriage to his mother, is a moment of painful self-awareness. Oedipus's ability to understand his fate, to recognize his own role in his destruction, is a key part of his tragedy. The myth suggests that knowledge, while empowering, can also be devastating. In Oedipus's case, the truth does not set him free. It destroys him. The moment of self-blinding is one of the most poignant scenes in the myth of Oedipus. After learning the truth, Oedipus blinds himself, a symbolic act of both punishment and self-purification. The act of blinding himself can be seen as a way for Oedipus to atone for his sins, to escape the painful reality of what he has done. But it also reflects his sense of helplessness in the face of fate. Oedipus is unable to undo the harm he has caused, and his self-inflicted blindness represents the ultimate consequence of his inability to escape his destiny. It is a tragic act, one that shows the depth of Oedipus's remorse and his understanding of the irreversibility of his actions. The myth of Oedipus is also a reflection on the nature of kingship and leadership. As king, Oedipus is initially portrayed as a wise and capable ruler who is beloved by the people of Thebes. His success in solving the riddle of the Sphinx and his determination to rid the city of the plague make him a heroic figure. However, his downfall reveals the fragility of leadership and the vulnerability of those in positions of power. Oedipus's fall from grace serves as a reminder that even the most powerful leaders are subject to forces beyond their control, and that the consequences of their actions can be catastrophic. In addition to the themes of fate, free will, and knowledge, the myth of Oedipus also explores the idea of hubris. Hubris, in Greek mythology, refers to excessive pride or arrogance, especially toward the gods. Oedipus's attempt to escape his fate can be seen as an act of hubris, as he believes that he can outwit the gods and control his own destiny. His downfall is a direct result of his belief that he can change the course of his fate, and it serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of overestimating one's own power. Ultimately, the myth of Oedipus is a tragedy of immense emotional depth and philosophical complexity. It explores the limits of human agency, the inescapable nature of fate, and the consequences of knowledge. Oedipus's story reminds us that no matter how much we may try to control our lives, fate often has its own course, and the pursuit of knowledge can sometimes lead to painful truths. The myth also speaks to the vulnerability of even the most powerful individuals and the fragility of human existence. Oedipus, in his quest to avoid his destiny, ultimately fulfills it, and in doing so, he becomes one of the most tragic figures in all of mythology. The myth of Orpheus and Eurydice is one of the most heart-wrenching and poignant tales in Greek mythology, a story that intertwines love, loss, and the power of art, particularly music. Orpheus, the legendary musician, whose music could charm animals, trees, and even stones, falls deeply in love with Eurydice, a beautiful nymph. Their love, pure and transcendent, seems to promise eternal happiness. However, like many great love stories in mythology, their happiness is short-lived, as tragedy strikes, leading to a profound exploration of the relationship between human desire, loss, and the limits of power. Orpheus, the son of Apollo, is a figure of incredible musical talent. His skill with the lyre is unmatched, and it is said that even the gods were captivated by the beauty of his music. When Orpheus plays, the world itself responds. Rivers cease to flow, birds stop singing, and wild animals gather around him in a peaceful, almost hypnotic trance. His music represents the highest form of artistic expression, transcending the material world and reaching into the divine. It is a symbol of harmony, beauty, and the deep connection between the human soul and the cosmos. Orpheus's love for Eurydice is equally profound. Eurydice, a nymph of the forest, is beautiful, free-spirited, and deeply connected to the natural world. The two of them fall in love at first sight, and their bond is one of deep emotional and spiritual resonance. Their marriage is a moment of perfect harmony, a union that seems destined to last forever. Orpheus, in particular, is overjoyed at the prospect of spending his life with Eurydice, feeling as though his music and her beauty form a perfect balance, a reflection of the harmony he strives for in his art. However, their love story takes a tragic turn when Eurydice is bitten by a venomous snake shortly after their wedding. She dies and descends into the underworld, leaving Orpheus in unbearable grief. Overcome with sorrow and desperate to retrieve his lost love, Orpheus decides a journey into the realm of the dead. His decision to descend to the underworld is not just an expression of love, but an act of defiance against the natural order. The underworld, a place of eternal separation and finality, is a realm that even the gods cannot easily alter, yet Orpheus, through the power of his music, hopes to overcome this barrier. When Orpheus arrives in the underworld, he plays his lyre to the gods of the dead, seeking permission to bring Eurydice back to the world of the living. His music is so beautiful and moving that it softens the hearts of Hades and Persephone, the king and queen of the underworld. They agree to allow Eurydice to return with Orpheus, on the condition that he does not look back at her until they have reached the surface. This stipulation is crucial. If Orpheus looks back before reaching the light of the living world, Eurydice will be lost to him forever. The agreement symbolizes a powerful moment in the myth. Orpheus must rely on trust and patience, virtues that are tested in the face of intense longing. The condition placed upon him is not just a simple test of willpower, but a profound meditation on the nature of desire and the limits of human control. Orpheus, the master of music, who can command the natural world with his art, must now confront the limitations of his own desires. His longing for Eurydice is so overwhelming that it seems impossible for him to obey the gods' command to wait. He is asked to trust in the invisible and unknowable, to step into the unknown without the comfort of certainty. This test of faith will prove to be his undoing. As Orpheus and Eurydice ascend from the underworld, Orpheus's desire to see his wife and confirm her presence becomes unbearable. The love he feels for her is so strong, so consuming, that he cannot resist the temptation to glance back. Just as they near the threshold of the living world, Orpheus turns his head. In that instant, the conditions of the gods' pact are broken, and Eurydice is pulled back into the underworld, vanishing from his sight forever. The tragic irony of this moment is palpable. Orpheus, who had traveled to the ends of the earth to reclaim his love, had only one final step to complete, and his failure to trust the unseen forces that guided him results in his ultimate loss. His act of looking back is symbolic of human nature itself. The desire to control the uncontrollable, to grasp at something that is ultimately out of reach. It is also a tragic commentary on the limitations of human perception and the fleeting nature of life and love. Even in the face of the most beautiful music, the most profound desires, the most powerful love, human beings are still bound by the limitations of their own understanding and control. The aftermath of Eurydice's second loss is devastating for Orpheus. He returns to the mortal world, heartbroken and alone. His music, once a source of beauty and harmony, becomes a lament. Orpheus withdraws from the world of the living, no longer seeking the companionship of others. He rejects the advances of women, including the Maenads, followers of Dionysus, who, in a fit of rage at his indifference, tear him apart. His death in itself is a reflection of the destructive power of unfulfilled desire. Orpheus, a figure of perfect harmony, is now a symbol of brokenness, as his quest for love and transcendence leads only to ruin. The myth of Orpheus and Eurydice, however, offers more than just a tale of loss. It also raises profound questions about the nature of art, music, and the human condition. Orpheus's music, which could charm a natural world and even alter the course of life and death, is a metaphor for the transformative power of art. Music, in particular, is portrayed as a force that transcends boundaries, able to heal, to unite, and to stir the deepest emotions. Orpheus's music, in its beauty and its power, represents the highest form of human expression, a divine gift that connects the mortal world with the immortal. But it is also a reminder that even the most powerful forms of expression cannot ultimately overcome the natural order of things. In his tragic loss, Orpheus is reminded that there are forces beyond human comprehension that no art, no matter how transcendent, can control. Moreover, the myth of Orpheus and Eurydice speaks to the relationship between life and death and the limits of human desire. Orpheus's quest to reclaim Eurydice from the underworld is a manifestation of the human desire to conquer death, to reverse the irreversible. It is a symbol of a yearning to defy fate and to bring back what is lost. However, in the end, The myth suggests that death is a part of life's natural cycle, and that no matter how much we desire to undo it, we must ultimately accept the separation it brings. Orpheus's failure to accept the finality of death results in his sorrow and alienation from the world, reinforcing the idea that true acceptance involves relinquishing the desire to control what cannot be controlled. In a broader sense, the myth of Orpheus and Eurydice also serves as a meditation on the nature of love and desire. Orpheus's love for Eurydice is pure and intense, but it is also destructive. His inability to let go, to trust in the process of life, ultimately leads to his downfall. This speaks to the destructive power of unchecked longing, the way in which desire can cloud judgment and lead to tragic consequences. Orpheus's love is not the problem. Rather, it is his inability to release his attachment to the object of his love that causes him to falter. The myth suggests that true love involves both connection and release, an understanding that love cannot always be possessed or controlled. Ultimately, the story of Orpheus and Eurydice is one of the most emotionally powerful myths in Greek mythology. It speaks of the power of music, the depth of love, the pain of loss, and the ultimate futility of trying to defy the natural order. Orpheus's tragic failure to bring Eurydice back from the dead is a poignant reminder of the limitations of human agency, the transient nature of life, and the inexorable passage of time. The myth remains relevant because it touches on universal human experiences, the longing for what is lost, the desire to transcend mortality, and the realization that some things are beyond our control. Orpheus's story continues to resonate with audiences today, reminding us that even in the face of overwhelming desire and the beauty of art, we must learn to accept the limits of our power and the inevitability of loss.